Hi, I'm Alex from Tailscale, and in today's video we're going to dive into the Tailscale command line interface, or CLI for short. Absolutely thrilling stuff, I know, a video about the command line, but I promise you it actually gets interesting later on. Now before we get there, I do want to make sure that you know about our brand new Discord server over at discord.gg/tailscale. It only launched a couple of weeks ago, and over there you can find our excellent community to ask questions and collaborate and learn more about Tailscale. Now, those of you who are sysadmins or DevOps professionals by trade have almost certainly dropped to the command line at some point. I'll probably extend that to our more nerdy home lab users as well. Many of you are probably familiar with the basics like tailscale up and serve and maybe even status to check on, what's going on with your tailnet behind the scenes. But there is a whole world beyond those basic commands in the Tailscale command line interface as well. And that's exactly what we're going to be digging into today. Now let's start with the most basic invocation of how we bring up the Tailscale command line interface. On a Mac at least, or indeed any other client where you have Tailscale installed that has a command line, you can just type the word Tailscale and it will print out all of the options that you have available. On a Mac, you will need to go to the client and click on Settings. You will need to go to CLI Integration and Show Me How. You'll need to make sure that Tailscale is installed. I've got some fanciness with Nix under the hood as to why mine is actually working. And just click the install button. It'll ask you for your password. And then it will install Tailscale into your path. And you should be able to type Tailscale and off you go. The first command we're going to look at today is Tailscale up. This is a very simple command in essence. It connects your device to a Tailscale network and authenticates you if needed. But you probably shouldn't use it for anything more than that. Pretty much every single option that Tailscale has is exposed via the up command. Indeed, if I do a Tailscale up --help, are you ready? Yes, there's an awful lot of stuff here which you can see that I have to make the text smaller for it to all fit on the screen. Now there are some situations where using arguments with Tailscale up is completely valid. Things like login server, for example. This is where you would specify a specific head scale instance. If you needed to do something and override the default control plane URL for Tailscale. Most people never will, but if you do, that's how you do it. Other stuff like a --QR. So for example, I can do Tailscale up --QR. This is going to allow me to authenticate just by using the QR code on the screen. So I can now tap or scan the QR code, and then I can just follow the authentication flow on my phone with no typing required. And as you can see, I can then just authenticate on my phone. I happen to have not signed into this one all summer because it's been the summer break. And now hopefully I can just connect this device to my tailnet that way using a QR code. You can also, through Tailscale up, you can also pass in an auth key. So for example, if I do up --auth key, I would then pass in the string of an auth key generated from my Tailscale admin console. So for example, I would go to settings, keys, and then generate an auth key here. And then I'd pass that in. I know I've already authenticated, so it's probably going to shout at me. But I could do that this way and sign into my tailnet programmatically. So if you're using this as part of a CI/CD environment, for example, this can be very useful. If you pass this into the repository secrets or something like that on GitHub, I think is what they call it. Now you can see that I've already authenticated to the tailnet, so it's not actually going to do anything. There are some other things that are exposed through Tailscale up as well, for example. So we've got things like --SSH. And this is one for me that I actually find incredibly useful on a brand new server. If all I do is Tailscale up --SSH, I then no longer need to worry about installing SSH keys into that remote node. So for example, I can now do SSH root at CLI demo, and I don't even need to worry about installing SSH keys into that remote server. So the problem with Tailscale up from a configuration perspective really comes when we do something like this. If I do --advertise exit node, which would allow me to use this CLI demo virtual machine as an exit node on the tailnet, you can see that it's going to complain that I haven't included all of the flags that I passed last time. In this case, it's only SSH, but you can imagine if there's a bunch of tags and a bunch of routes and a bunch of exit node stuff configured, having to remember each of those things to be configured every single time can get a little bit unwieldy, which is why we recommend that people use the tailscale set command instead. So for example, I would do tailscale set --advertise exit node. And you'll see there's no complaint at all. I don't have to remember that I did the SSH flag last time. Now you can use Tailscale up to unset parameters too, should you wish to. So I can do advertise exit node equals false, but then I do also need to pass the --SSH flag in order for the command to be executed successfully. So you can kind of see why we don't really push people down the Tailscale up command. We really want you to be using Tailscale set, which is going to be my next command. As we discussed a moment ago, Tailscale set doesn't require the complete set of desired settings on each invocation. Many of the same flags are supported. As you can see here, if we do a --help, there's an awful long list of things here which are supported. And we have a full list in the documentation, of course, but we want to encourage users to use Tailscale set over other commands, as it will eventually be used by our declarative configuration model. In fact, I'm going to put a link to this GitHub issue you can see on the screen right here in the description down below if you'd like to follow that progress through the open source development model that Tailscale follows. Now, some of the things that you might find useful, for example, in Tailscale set, we can set things like SSH. We can look at things like Tailscale auto update. So let me do Tailscale set -- auto update. This will keep the Tailscale client up to date. Very useful on remote systems. Now, another thing you might want to do is set the host name of this box, for example. So if I want to do -- host name, I can now call this Bob. And in my tailnet, for example, let me go and look at the admin console. You can see that that's now actually renamed itself to Bob. So that could be a really handy one if you need to ever rename a node on the command line. I'm going to go back to the original Tailscale hostname of CLI demo just to keep things simple. Now, another thing that we can do is the -- web client, and you'll see that this is now running on the Tailscale IP on port 5252. So if we go to my web browser and type that in, you can see I now get a nice little web overview of exactly what the client is doing on that node in a browser. You can see the Tailscale SSH server is running, for example, and we can learn more about that by clicking here. There's a bunch of other stuff too. So for example, let's just click that button that says sign in to confirm my identity. We're not diving too deep into the web UI in this video, but just for the sake of it, we can actually turn Tailscale SSH on and off from the web client. Now you can see we've lost our SSH connection because I did that. So let me turn that back on and then come back over here, and you can see I've got SSH access again. But that proves to you, I suppose, just how instant, when Tailscale initiates things in the policy, just how instant things happen. In fact, let me show that again. Let me do, ping.google.com and move the window so you can see what's going on. And if I check that box again, boom. Split second. I love that when that happens. You can see that the SSH connection is immediately terminated just through the web UI. So that's a really cool thing. I don't think many of our users know that the web UI even exists. So if that's you, welcome to the web UI club. The subnet router stuff is there too. So if you want to advertise, if you want to turn this into a subnet router so you can access non-Tailscale devices, that's in the web UI too. And again, this isn't really a deep dive on the web UI, although it's kind of turning into one. And then there's a bunch of other information about this node and what it looks like on your tailnet on this details page too. Now, is there anything else in the Tailscale set thing that we want to look at today? I don't know. But if you want to find out more, you can always do --help, and that will print out all of the options and all of the flags that you can set using a specific command. I know all the things you can set using set, right? So as you can see, Tailscale set actually exposes a great number of different configuration flags. Some of these are definitely for the more advanced among you, things like accepting DNS to be true or false, for example. Like if you need that, you need that probably. Things like app connectors and exit nodes and routes and that kind of thing. It's all there. So yeah, go take a look at Tailscale set. And like I say, if you want to use Tailscale up, by all means go ahead and do that, but just be under the full knowledge that over time we will be moving towards funneling users, no pun intended, funneling users towards Tailscale set away from Tailscale up for all but that sort of basic initial login flow. So we're going to move into another Tailscale CLI subcommand now called Tailscale switch. This is a very straightforward one. This lets me switch tailnets. So I can do switch -- list. And this will show me all of the different tailnets that are signed into this specific laptop, this specific client. So for example, right now I'm signed in as a tailscales@gmail.com, as I always am for these videos. But if I do tailscale switch and then do help, you can see that the option available to me is list. But if I want to actually just switch tailnets, all I need to do is supply a specific account ID. So in this case, alexktz@gmail.com is 30A1. So I would do tailscale switch 30A1, and then from the command line, I can switch between my different tailscale accounts. Now, if, for example, I haven't logged into that account all summer because I haven't really done anything on this laptop for a month because I've been out, at the beach and stuff, it will go through the authentication flow for me and ask me to log into my tailnet. Now, I'm in the wrong Chrome session for the AlexKTZ account, but that's not important here right now. I don't actually want it to use that account moving forward. I just wanted to show you. So let's do CCE7 to switch back to my main Tailscale account, and we have success. So you can see on the command line, this is how you would do it on Linux too. Works on macOS as well, obviously, because that's what we're using right here. But that's how you'd switch between multiple accounts using the Tailscale CLI tooling. Now, how do we know what the view of the world that our Tailscale client has is? Well, we use Tailscale status, of course, and we can do Tailscale status --help to get a full list of all the different options that this specific command supports. So, Tailscale status in and of itself, very simply, just prints the view of the world that this client has of my tailnet. Now, this is really useful when you're debugging things. So if you're trying to figure out, if you're writing a grant or a policy rule with an ACL or something, and you're trying to figure out why or what nodes can this node see. I've just created this rule that prevents this tag from seeing that user group's worth of devices. If I do a Tailscale status and that other node doesn't show up, I know that my rule is either doing what I want or not, for example. So that's where Tailscale status is really useful. But what I bet you didn't know is that Tailscale status has a web server built in. So if I do --web and then --browser, watch what happens. This is now going to open a web browser and show me all of the devices in my tailnet in a very pretty little web page. How about that? Including things like the received and transmitted packets and the activity and the connections and how those connections are made between different devices. For example, you can see that the connection between the CLI demo node and PVE, for example, to this client is a direct connection, and that's printed out for me right there. Pretty cool stuff. Now, of course, if you want to expose that through Tailscale Funnel to a remote administrator or something, you could do that using Tailscale Server Funnel, of course. What else have we got? So let's do Tailscale status --peers. See what that gives us. Again, that's pretty much the default view that we get when we run status anyway. Now, for those of you who are more sort of developer minded, you can do Tailscale status --JSON. I'm going to pipe that into JQ so that it looks pretty. And there you go. You get to see all of the different host keys and all of the information that gets exposed between different nodes on your tailnet. There's nothing sensitive here particularly. If you've ever done anything with cryptography, you'll understand that the private keys remain private on each device, and all that we're looking at here are the public keys. So again, there's nothing too sensitive going on. But for example, if you ever needed to get a specific piece of information, like what the capability map of a specific node is, for example, that's how you would do that. You do Tailscale status --JSON, and that prints out the command that you can see above. Pretty cool stuff. Let's just take a look at the --active command. This is a pretty interesting one. You can see if I run Tailscale status by default, it prints out all of the nodes on the tailnet, including ones that are idle or offline. If I don't want that, I only want to see active nodes, I can pass Tailscale status with the active flag, and boom, there you go. You can see I've only got my 3 active nodes, which includes Baldric, this laptop, the LXC container that's running the CLI demo, and the Proxmox host that's running on. So that covers Tailscale status, I think. Now, the next thing I wanted to talk about today is Tailscale ping. So let's take a look at Tailscale ping for just a moment. This is a way to basically use the Tailscale layer to make sure that you're pinging packets directly between your nodes. So the Tailscale ping command pings a peer node from the Tailscale layer and reports which route it took for its response. The first ping will probably go over Tailscale's DERP or relay protocol servers, whilst the NAT traversal finds a direct path through. So for example, I'm going to go back to status and just show you all the nodes I've got here. I've got one in England, in UK Norwich. I've got another one in Canada at CAD YYZ, I suppose if it's Canada, right? And then I've got the exit node running in, well, just running in just this rack down here behind me. Just on that little Dell 1 litre PC that I did in the self-hosting series before the summer break. So if I want to use Tailscale ping to understand how the network is kind of handling the packets between different devices, I can do Tailscale ping and then type in the name of a node on my network. So Tailscale ping PVE, for example, is just pinging that rack behind me. So it's going via the interface of 192.168.1.10. That's staying within my local network. Okay, it's traversing a VLAN in this case, but it basically traverses the interface of 192.168.1.10. So it doesn't leave this network. I now know that because it's just told me it did it in 9 milliseconds. There's no way it's going to go to Canada in 9 milliseconds from here. So let's do that. Let's now do exit CAD YYZ and see what happens. Are we going to establish a direct connection right away? I should have noticed that that particular node appears to be offline. In fact, it told me that right here. I just didn't notice it because I was talking. Okay, so let's do the UK node instead. Let's do UK NOR for UK Norwich. This is now going to show me that it's ponging through the DERP node at London Heathrow, LHR. I believe that's what it stands for at least. And then it eventually established a direct connection in just a few seconds. So using Tailscale ping, I'm now able to determine that I've got a direct connection between those two nodes on my tailnet. And indeed, just pay attention to how that changes. So this line right here shows me idle and offers exit node right now. But now if I do Tailscale status again, it's going to show me that the Norwich node is now directly connected through the WAN IP of that remote host, which I think is my mother-in-law's network. So please don't DDoS her. Otherwise I'll get a very nasty phone call. Alex, why is my internet not working? Don't know. So you can see that now this line shows I've got a direct connection through the WAN IP of that remote site. So you can see how we can start to use all of these commands together. So we've got Tailscale status showing us what's going on, and then ping showing us how the actual packets find the route to the remote host. And we also saw that the first ping here traversed a Tailscale DERP server, one of our relay protocol servers as I talked about. And then as the NAT traversal, stateful packet filtering traversal magic happened behind the scenes, eventually after just 3 or 4 pings, we established a direct connection. Now, sometimes you might find that Tailscale ping works, but a normal ping doesn't. And that can mean that one side's operating system firewall might be blocking packets because Tailscale ping itself doesn't inject the packets into the other side's ton devices. By default, Tailscale ping will stop after 10 pings or once a direct connection is established, whichever happens to come first. Now, the provided hostname must resolve to a DNS name or be a Tailscale IP or a subnet IP advertised by a Tailscale relay node in order for the routing table to know where to send those packets when it's doing the Tailscale ping. All right, so that's Tailscale ping. Is there anything else we need to look at by doing --help? There are a few other things. You know how I talked about Tailscale ping running at the Tailscale layer? Well, if you want to do an ICMP level ping instead of a Tailscale level ping, you can specify that here with --ICMP. Now I'm curious as to what exactly a verbose ping might do. So let me do Tailscale ping --verbose and just see what happens here. Well, there you go. You can see that actually the direct connection, I guess I'd been waffling on for long enough that it had, the stateful firewalls had reset themselves, and we had to redo the NAT traversal in just a few minutes. You can see here that the time and date and that kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, the verbose isn't really that verbose, but it might be useful in some logs somewhere. So there you go. That's Tailscale ping. Now the next command that I want to look at today is Tailscale DNS. Now this one basically prints out the view of the world that this client has about the DNS of your network. So for example, let me do Tailscale DNS status, and that's going to now print out all the name servers that I have. So this 10.42.0.54 is the local DNS server in my network. You can see that Velociraptor Noodlefish, that's my Tailscale TSNet search domain. So that's the URL that we give to every tailnet. So automatically that will be appended to things that don't have a fully qualified domain name as part of the search process. And you can see any split DNS that you've got set up here too. Now, this particular tailnet has quite a basic DNS setup. So let me switch to my personal one in order to show you something a little more contrived, a little more over the top. I'm not logged into that one, so just give me a second to get logged in and I'll be right back. All right, now I'm back and you can see that I've logged into my personal tailnet and there's way too many devices on here. But what I want to show you is the Tailscale DNS status of the tailnet that I have. So for example, I've got several search domains configured so that I can have different DNS servers in different physical locations be responsible for their local networks configuration. So WD, for example, is one site that I control. NR is another one. That kind of thing. And then I've got specific websites that I want to make sure always go to a specific domain server as well. I kind of abuse the split DNS a little bit in order to make that search domain stuff work. But you can also see that I've got a bunch of split DNS routes in here as well. Stuff like the BBC, for example, always goes out over some connections I have back in the UK. The less we say about that, the better, probably. Else we'll get cancelled. Let's not have that. But you can see, for example, this is all of the magic DNS information that this node has as a view of the world. And this, as you can see, can get quite complex quite quickly. Now, another command that's available to us as part of the Tailscale DNS options is query. So the Tailscale DNS query subcommand performs a DNS query for the specified name using the internal DNS forwarder. Now, if you aren't familiar with how Tailscale DNS works, every single client, which includes your phone and your Apple TV and your Android TV, set-top box, that kind of stuff, they all have a local DNS resolver running on them. And every time we do an update, a node joins a tailnet, or we change an ACL rule or anything, those rule sets get pushed to those clients. So that's what this local internal DNS forwarder is talking about here. That's running on this laptop. It's mirroring the central control plane's view of the world, but it is just that, it's a mirror. But it does mean that DNS is a lot faster than it would otherwise be. So let's just look up google.com. So by typing Tailscale DNS query, google.com, you can see that came back with a normal DNS name, and we can see the DNS server that was used in order to fetch that remote query. But let's say that I want to grab something from my tailnet, for example. So I'm going to do the fully qualified domain name of this exit node, for example, and let's just see what it comes back with. There we go. We can see that we get the 100.cgnat IP address of this specific node that comes back from the resolvers. That's the IPv6 address there, as well as an IPv4. So we can, this is probably a very similar situation as to using Dig, which is a tool that lets me look up DNS records and things like that outside of the Tailscale universe. You can see here that I get the same address come back here. But if you want a Tailscale specific view of the world, because you can override some things in the magic DNS section of Tailscale over here in the admin console. Sometimes we confuse ourselves as network admins. Sometimes we do things with the best of intentions and forget that we did it a few weeks later. And we need to just query what view of the world does this client have. And most of the tools I've shown you today are actually designed to just kind of show you that kind of stuff. Speaking of the view of the world, let's do a Tailscale netcheck. Now this one's pretty interesting. This shows me the view of the world that this client has of the rest of the Tailscale kind of public infrastructure. You can see all the different places that we run our relay nodes in, our derp nodes, these things here. You can see my nearest one, I live on the east coast of the States, and you can see my nearest one is in Virginia, in Ashburn, and that makes complete sense, with New York not far behind. Singapore is 244 milliseconds away. That makes complete sense too. The speed of light is only so fast. So this can be really useful if we want to know things like, is UDP supported, for example, on this network, on this node? Where is my nearest derp node for performance, and things like exit nodes and that kind of stuff. But if we do -- help, we'll see that netcheck has a few other options that we can do. So for example, we can do, again, like we could with status, we can do a --JSON, which I'm going to pipe to JQ. What did I, it's format. Okay, it's format JSON. and then we'll pipe that to JQ. And then we can use that maybe to dynamically route things around within the network. Like, let's say that we want to keep an eye on the latency between different regions and map that to a Prometheus dashboard or something like that. This is how you would do that, which sort of ties neatly into the Tailscale metrics command that we have as well. So I'll show you Tailscale metrics whilst we're in here, and do --help. And this really, if you're into DevOps and sort of building dashboards and that kind of thing, this will let you expose a bunch of client metrics. In fact, I've made a video about that a while back, and I'll link that up here. But let's do Tailscale metrics print. And this shows you all of the different things. If you're familiar with Prometheus, this will look incredibly familiar to you. But this shows you all of the things of the view of the world that this node has. So you can see how if you start to combine the client metrics that we offer with the JSON output of netcheck, and just all of these things are data points that you can use as an admin to make the Tailscale network work for you and do what you need. So I think that's about all we've got time for today. You can see here that there is a huge long list of different things that we can look at in the Tailscale CLI. This could have easily been a 10-part video series, but I decided just to do a deep dive into the CLI of some of the less known stuff perhaps today, and digging into maybe some of the options that you've used but didn't know some of the other stuff about. So leave a comment down below and let me know what else you'd like to see from this list, a bit more of a deep dive. You know, for example, we didn't dig into drive, for example, or cert, or bug report, or file to send and receive files. There's a bunch more stuff in there. I highly recommend that you go and have a play. Each of these things, for example, let's just do file --help. Each of these things has their own help option, and I would love to hear from you. Now, if you are using any of this stuff and you get kind of lost or confused, we have a brand new Discord server at discord.gg/tailscale. I'd love to see you over there. I'm over there at AlexKTZ, or maybe it's Ironic Badger. I forget which I am. Anyway, come join us on the Tailscale Discord server. And as always, thank you so much for watching. And until next time, I've been Alex from Tailscale.